Part 3. Ash on the Green. The council green had been sown with grass 100 years ago to remind men of hills they would never see again. It had been walked down to mud by festivals, then replanted, then trampled, then replanted. Each generation had thought itself the first to discover leisure on a patch of earth, kept green at terrible expense. Now, at the centre of that expanse, the circle of ash mocked every gardener that had ever touched a spade. It was perfect. No scatter, no smear. A ring as if drawn with a compass by a hand too precise for mercy. The grass within was not burned, not wilted, not touched. The ash sat on it without mixing, as though the earth had been made to cradle it. Crowds pressed the rope line. Mothers with children lifted them so their eyes would never forget the shape. Merchants muttered of omens. A priest of the Nine tried to chant, but his voice cracked. The Mitres secretary took notes furiously while sweating through his collar. Captain Var pushed through with Carrick at his side, the watch flanking in pairs. People stepped aside for them, but not far. They wanted to see what law would do when confronted with a law written by something older. Custodian Rel was already there, of course. He had 2 tower adepts at his shoulders. They stood without sweat, without even dust on their boots, as though the air made way for them. Rel's eyes were on the ash. He did not blink often. "Captain," he said when Var drew close, "what do you read?" Var squatted by the line. He pinched a bit of grass near the edge of the ash and rubbed it between finger and thumb. It was alive, healthy. The ash did not touch it. "I read that something wanted us to see the line," Var said. "Not what's inside it, not what's outside, just the border." "A warning?" Rel asked. "A promise," Var said. Carrick felt the pull of it even at 3 strides away. His cut stung. The ash circle seemed to whisper, step in, be measured. His boots itched across the rope. He set the spear butt down hard as though nailing himself to the spot. "Captain," said a councillor nearby, a wide man with a ring of sausages for fingers, "this is outrage. This is desecration of the green. People are saying it's a sign against the festival's cancelling. You must disperse them." "Disperse what?" Var said without standing. "The ash. The fear, or the men who want to go home believing a line of soot can't hurt them." The councillor blustered. "You're sworn to keep the peace." "I am keeping it," Var said. "No one's dead yet." He rose. "When men step in, then we'll count the dead." As if the words summoned it, a boy ducked the rope. He couldn't have been more than 12. His shirt was too thin for the wind. His hair was the colour of straw left out too long. He ran straight for the circle before anyone could grab him. "Stay back!" Carrick shouted, but the boy was already there. He skidded to a stop at the edge. His chest rose and fell. He looked at the ash with the solemnity of a priest. Then he stepped in. The crowd gasped. The boy stood unharmed in the centre of the circle. He looked around, blinking, then raised his hands as if in triumph. "See? It's nothing!" Then he opened his mouth. Ash poured out. Not choking, not sputtering. Pouring like a jug tipped. His eyes rolled. His thin body shuddered as black dust cascaded onto the grass. Spirals drew themselves at his feet. Smaller ones, dozens, weaving around his shoes. The boy fell backward, still twitching, ash flooding from his lips. Carrick vaulted the rope. His boots struck mud. He dragged the boy up by the collar and hauled him out of the circle. The ash stopped the instant they crossed the line. The boy sagged in his arms, his lips were black, his chest barely moved. Carrick laid him down beyond the rope. "Get a medic!" he barked. The crowd howled. Some cursed the boy. Some called him a prophet. Some demanded the captain do something, anything. Var raised both arms. His scar showed white against his sleeve. His voice cracked across the green like a whip. "Enough!" Silence came, ragged but present. "No more stepping into lines you didn't draw," Var said. "No more children proving courage with their lungs. This is not a miracle. This is not a curse. This is a man's hand somewhere in this city using a tool older than us. And we will find him. And we will break him." Rel's lips curved a fraction. "Well said," he murmured. The boy coughed once, black flecks on his chin. His eyes opened, glazed. He whispered a word that none of them recognised, but all of them felt. Mine. Then he stopped breathing. The mother's wail tore the crowd apart. Back at the yard, the watch argued. We can't hold it here, Aldrin said. Every night they come closer. Every day someone tries a door. By week's end, half the ward will be singing in their sleep. If we give it to the tower, Lyra said, we don't stop it. We just put a lock on the door and pretend it doesn't knock. Better a lock than our wall cracking, Aldrin shot back. Kerrick slammed his palm on the table. No more talk of locks. Did you see that boy? Did you hear what he said? That thing speaks through mouths that don't know its name. The tower won't silence it. They'll feed its students until it hums a new song. Var let them spit words until they wore out. Then he said, the choir doesn't want the relic. Not really. They want the city. The relic is just a bell they can ring. So we take the bell away. Not to the tower, not to the choir. Away. Away where? Lyra asked. The fire, Var said. His eyes glinted like struck flint. There's a forge older than the city, beneath the river, Blackwater Furnace. They say it can melt stone and bone alike. We carry it there. We break it. And if it breaks us, at least the city lives another season. The room went still. Finally Dawn rumbled. Furnaces respect weight. That's settled then, Var said. We move at dusk. No council, no tower, just us. But dusk never came quietly in Larkenfall. By the time the lamps were lit, word had already run ahead of them. The choir gathered in alleys. The tower's grey coats blocked bridges. Spies whispered in taverns. And in the coal vault, the brick warmed until mortar cracked. Kerrick pressed his palm against it before they moved the chains. He swore he felt a heartbeat. He whispered, not mine. The stone hummed back, mine. And the night swallowed the watch whole. They dressed like undertakers. Not for disguise. No one would mistake the watch for gentle traders in grief, but because black swallowed lamp glow and didn't flash on a crossbow sight. The yard breathed like a lung before a dive. Armour straps pulled, buckles spoke, blades checked their own edges across whetstones with the brittle song of a winter cricket. Var stood under the iron ribs of the yard's gate and counted his people, the way a miller counts sacks and hands, because both matter if you want flour tomorrow. Dawn cinched the shoulder plates that had been his father's. The leather groaned like bark in frost. Lyra fed a stub of candle into a tin box, blew it out, and tucked the smoke-scented wick back into her sleeve. Aldrin kissed 2 coins, pressed one inside each boot, and looked like he regretted the piety. Kerrick tightened the chain mitts that would grip the relic's cradle, each palm set with 3 steel prongs that mated with the iron carrying poles. The mitts were a mason's trick adapted to a worse trade. His fingers flexed. He'd never held a child. He was about to carry a stone that wanted to be one. Routes, Var said. Say them. Northgate, Hook Street, Fish Market, Dye Lane, river stairs at crossings, Lyra recited. And the shadows, Var said. Everything between Hook and crossings, Aldrin said. It's where gods get their knives sharpened. We don't go where gods go, Var answered. We go where men forget to sweep. He let the ghost of a smile show. It helped. Masks up on bridges. Dawn, you take the rear brace. If the choir hits, they'll want the weight. They'll come for you. Dawn rolled a shoulder, a tectonic adjustment. Let them come. I've got dues uncollected. Tower, Lyra said, will try to shepherd us to their vault, Var said. They won't stop the choir with blood. They'll stop us with paperwork. Avoid their shepherding, Aldrin grunted. You saying we refuse if they order us? I'm saying if they want to help, Var said. They can walk behind us and hum advice to their parchment. If they step in front, we count them as choir with better grammar. That won a few bleak chuckles. Var didn't like laughter before a march, but he liked silence more. He turned to the old wall. The brick was darker where the relic warmed it, as if heat had a stain. They'd run water down the mortar so it wouldn't light when they broke it. A trick from kiln thieves. Kerrick set his palm to the brick. It thrummed. He'd slept with women who had been quieter. On my count, Var said. Key bar. The iron bar bit the grout. Dawn and Kerrick put their backs to it. the bar a lever and their bodies the fulcrum. Mortar gave way with a sound like someone grinding teeth in another room. A brick fell, then another. Then the wall coughed a breath of old cellar and new heat. It waited there, inside. Stone that looked like it had not been carved so much as taken in hand by a patient ocean and then ripped free, unwilling. Cords of iron had been riveted around it years ago. They had sunk into the surface like rings swallowed by a tree. The surface wasn't smooth. It was too precise to be natural and too wrong to be human. Tiny grooves spiraled inward from every face, and where they met you didn't want to wait. Lyra whispered, "It's smaller than I thought." "It isn't," Var said. They fed the cradle under it, oak banded with iron, poles running fore and aft. It gave way grudgingly, as if insulting the tree before it consented. 4 men on each pole. Carrick took the forward right, Dawn the rear left. The rings on the relic's hide clicked against the cradle bands like chessmen agreeing to be captured. "Lift," Var said. They rose. The weight arrived in the arms, travelled the spine, set up home in the hip joint. It wasn't the heaviness of a millstone or an anvil. It was the heaviness of a promise. Carrick felt his teeth decide to ache. The relic hummed low, and his cut, almost healed, prickled and wept a thread of warmth. He bit the inside of his cheek and tasted iron. Not red. Older. "She's singing," Aldrin whispered. "She's listening," Lyra corrected. "Doors," Var said. They moved. The yard gate yawned open. The street outside had been swept by sergeants with curses and bribes until it was as empty as a saint's purse. The lamps were snuffed under their glass tongues. The alleyways yawned like unstitched wounds. Frost limned the gutters with a shine that could have been silver if anyone in Larkenfall were ever that lucky. Boots took the rhythm. Hoist, step, breathe, hum. The hum came whether they wanted it or not. A single-note thread that stuck in the throat and asked the lungs if there was room for a guest tonight. It made Lyra's candle stub warm against her wrist. It made Dawn blink as if remembering a forge years ago that had never cooled. Hook Street rose, narrow between houses that leaned together like conspirators. Ropes strung above them. No laundry swung. Everyone had learned fast. "Eyes," Var murmured. They saw them. Silhouettes at windows, pale faces stenciled by lampghost on panes. A dog with its head tilted, listening to the pitch. A girl on a step, clutching a broom as if it were a man's hand. "Don't stop," Var said. They didn't. Stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant hearing too much. They made the fish market by the tolling of the bluebell over the old well. The stalls were skeletal. Planks folded, hooks bare, wet boards that breathed brine. The smell did not lose to the relic. It stood its ground. Carrick was grateful. He'd rather think of scales than spirals. Movement, not wind. Wind admits it moves. This was like cloth giving way to a shoulder. "Right lane," Lyra hissed. "Hoods. 6. Then 12. Then the rest that had been waiting behind barrels." The choir didn't wear a uniform. They wore agreement. Musks, family made. Twisted wood, hammered tin, bits of mirror like eyes grown wrong. Their hands were empty until they weren't. Knives were never empty. "Not today," Var said, almost pleasantly. "It's late and I don't want to be widowed." The first circle of the choir didn't chant. They didn't need to, the hum did their work. A woman near the front swayed. Her mask split to show a mouth that had learned to smile for funerals. "You don't have to carry it," she told Var. "You only have to let go." "Just like your father did," another voice said from a different mask. "Remember? When he put you on a doorstep and knocked and ran." Carrick felt Var pause in the chain for half a heartbeat. Then the captain's voice went flat. "I have forgotten what men said at my door," he replied. "I remember the door I knock now." He nodded once to Dawn. "Rear, brace." The choir moved like a tide meets a rock. The first wave wants to hug. The second wants to borrow a tooth. The third believes it owns your knees. "Lift higher," Var snapped. They did, and the cradle rose enough that the relic cleared the first lunge. Knives snagged wood and shrieked. A masked man clamped onto the rear pole. Dawn let him have 2 steps worth of hope. then cut his hands open with a twist of oak that no man of sensible county would argue with. The man fell away, fingers leaving skin, the sound thin and unbelieving. Lyra's hands stirred in her sleeves. She flung the tin box ahead. It hit cobble and popped open. A breath of smothered candle poured out, the stink of old smoke and vinegar. Men stumbled as their eyes watered. The world turned for them and forgot to invite their feet. She used no more magic than a kitchen. The choir coughed and fell back on reflex, not ritual. Arrows hissed from the right-hand stall line, too neat for choir. Uldren swore and ducked under the pole. A shaft chewed a notch from the cradle and spun away whining. Kerrick looked, but only with a sliver of eye, grey cloaks. Tower. They stepped from the shadow of the fish hall, 8 of them, blades sheathed for now, short recurves in hand, strings thrumming with the aftersound of release. They wore the tower's sign, 3 chevrons under an eye, stitched into the shoulder in thread that drank light. Custodian Rel's second, an adept with a beard that had never known soup, raised an open palm. "The tower offers escort," he called. "We mark your route as compromised." Var didn't lower the cradle. "We walk to crossings," he said. "You walk behind." The adept's mouth moved in a priest's version of a smile. "We prefer to set the pace. We prefer to still be alive when we choose our next one," Var said. "Behind." A tower archer knocked another arrow, expression unreadable. The adept lifted 2 fingers, the bow lowered. "Very well," he said. "Behind. But if you turn south at Die Lane, we will take the burden." Var nodded as if he'd give the request to his valet for filing. "We don't turn south." The choir, discovering a new enemy, hissed. Tower arrows hissed back. 2 masks went down with little comedic sounds, as if someone had knocked a bottle. The fish market's pillars learned the sound of a temple for a few moments, the whistle of faith wrapped in wood. "Move," Var said, and they did. Out of the market and into Die Lane, where vats lived like toads, and the stones sweated colour in streaks. A bucket lay spilled. Purple oozed and looked like a bruise deciding where to be. People had moved out of Die Lane hours ago, leaving open vats like wells into other versions of water. The hum of the relic chased itself around the barrels and came back louder. The choir did not follow into the vats, or they did and left shoes. "Hold," Uldren said, soft as prayer. The silhouette at the far end of the lane did not look like choir, or tower, or anyone who paid taxes. It looked like a decision at last orders. He was tall because his coat wanted him to be. He didn't wear a mask. He wore a face that suggested he had never wanted to know what other men thought of him, because they would be wrong. A sword at his hip was bound into its scabbard by 3 lengths of black cloth, tied in knots that wolves might have learned. He stepped aside without stepping aside. "Turn south," he said. "Crossings," Var replied. "South," the man repeated, "into the grain quarter." "Grain quarter goes to the river," Uldren muttered. "It does," Lyra said, "but not to the furnace." Kerrick recognised the man's stillness. He'd seen it once in a mirror when he'd been waiting to see if a landlord would be the sort to demand rent in coin. "Who are you?" Kerrick asked, because sometimes men like to answer their own questions. The man looked at him. It was like being measured for a coffin by a blind carpenter. "I am what happens when a city thinks it can build a wall around hunger," he said. "I am what men hire when they don't want to know how the sausage is made. Assassin," Uldren breathed. "Guild." The man tipped 2 fingers in a gesture that neither agreed nor disagreed. "The river stairs at crossings are watched," he said, "by those who sing, and by those who write the songs out phonetically after. Turn south." Lyra's lips thinned. "When a man with a bound sword tells you to change roads," she whispered, "you ask who bound it." "Me," the assassin said. He had a good ear. "Why?" Var asked. "Because I promised," the assassin said simply. "And because if I unbind it, men will decide to be brave. And then I will be late for supper." He made a small, impatient motion. "South. You're wearing your weight on the wrong shoulders." Var glanced to Dawn, to Lyra, to Kerrick. The captain had only ever led men into buildings that hated them. He could do it into a street. "South," he said. "We cut across the grain quarter." Uldren warned the tower to keep their teeth to themselves. Uldren jogged back to the greycoats like a man trotting to a priest to explain why a confession must be rescheduled. The adept listened, smiled a winter at him, and nodded once. The tower slid in behind, a shadow polite enough to pretend it wasn't planning to trample your own. They turned south. Grain quarter smelled of sacks and the men who slept on them. The longhouses leaned, their lintels carved with sheaves and bells that had once meant plenty. Rats paid rent to no one. Cats collected taxes off the books. A millstone leaned against a wall like the skull of something that had tried to roll away and failed. The hum shifted in the tight, dusty air. It sounded almost pleased. "Not yours," Carrick muttered to it. "Mine," it returned sweetly. They made the square where the old grain weights were kept under an awning. It had been a place for arbitration in better years. This sack is what it says it is. This coin is dull from fair use. This feud can be killed with bread and a handshake. Now it was a place where the awning knocked itself in wind and no one offered you a seat. A woman stepped from the shadow of the weights. She wore a dress that had been good twice and patched well 3 times. Her hands were flower outlined. Her eyes were not. "You're the watch," she said. "We are," Var said. "Then watch this," she said softly, and raised her skirt to show a bare knee. Lyra went scarlet with fury. "Do you think he—" The woman ran a fingernail down her thigh. She didn't break skin. She whispered a word that might have been bread if bread could be cruel. The ash circle drew itself on her flesh. It wasn't soot. It was absence. It ate hair and fine lines. It left her skin above and below looking oddly healthy. The ring pulsed once. The woman's head tipped back. She made a small, happy sound like someone touching warm stone. Then she staggered forward and reached for the cradle. Dawn's forearm met her chest. It was like hitting a stump that had opinions. She bounced back, landed on the square stones, and laughed through her teeth. "You can't get it to the water," she sang. "You are water. It will drink you trying." From the longhouses figures poured. Not choir, in their Sunday clothes if they'd ever had a Sunday. Men with sacking hats. Girls with beads of glass. Old men still showing the shapes of the boys they had been if they turned their heads fast. The ash rings bloomed on their skin like medals given by a colonel who had never left his tent. The watch formed a box without speaking. It's a thing men learn when the room stops understanding what a door is for. "Back to the wall," Var said. "Dawn right side, Carrick left. We keep the box. Any hands on the cradle lose something they'll miss." They came. Not all at once, waves must be organised, but in ropes of people tripping over each other, muttering the words as if learning their letters by standing in line. Some were crying. Some were laughing as if the joke had finally been explained. One boy stopped, looked at the ring on his forearm like it was the best tattoo in the ward, and then bit it. Blood welled black. He grinned and held his bleeding arm toward the cradle like a priest with a censer. Carrick's spear haft met the boy's wrist. Bone tapped wood. The boy yelped, confusion bared to the root. He didn't run. He tried again. Carrick used the other end of the spear. It suggested the boy try a different day to die brave. He crumpled. The ring on his skin smiled without needing a mouth. "Captain," Lyra called. Var was somewhere between prayer and arithmetic. He was counting the beats to the next push, the weight shifts in the men at the poles, the angles at which you could use a cradle like a plough. "2 more steps right," he snapped. "We put their backs to the fountain." They did. The old dry fountain had once been a sheaf of stone with water falling through it. Now it was a dry sheaf with dust falling around it. They pushed the cradle's rear against it. It gave them a third hand. The woman who had shown them her knee scrambled to her feet and came again. Lyra's palm clapped against the woman's cheek, hard enough to change her immediate theology. "No," Lyra said, and the word was so stern and so tired that for a heartbeat the ring on the woman's skin stopped pulsing, as if a door had been closed with authority in a house that had forgotten it had rooms. The tower arrived like rain that thinks it's too fine to get you wet. Their arrows went high, warning shots that made a song on slate and gutter. The adept raised both palms, fingers forming sigils that were meant to calm and only made men feel observed. "Citizens," he called, "this is a sanctioned transport." A rock struck him above the eyebrow. He blinked. Blood wrote a short story down his nose. He seemed astonished that the city had dared to bloody an idea. "Sanction this," a miller snarled. The grey-coats lowered the bows from academic to practical. The next volley hummed at knee-height. Men fell. Women screamed the names of their gods and their husbands in the same breath. The square exploded into 1,000 smaller streets made of elbows and ribs and plans revised on the hoof. "Now," Var said. They moved along the fountain, then off it, turning the cradle like a house being walked on hired shoulders. The crowd broke on them, reformed, poured past to spit at the tower, then realised the thing they wanted was going the other way and came again. It would have been farce if the rings hadn't been so bright. A hand found Kerrick's wrist, cold, not to the skin, through it. He looked down. A girl of 15, hair braided, eyes like wells no one had bucketed in years. "Please," she said, "it hurts to be near it." "Then go," he said. "I can't," she whispered, and tried to lift his hand from the pole and would have if his hand had wanted to go. It didn't. He shoved her away, not gently, and hated her for making him do it and hated himself for needing to. "Left!" Uldren shouted. "Left, left!" Crossbow, not tower, high on a longhouse, string drawn by a wheel. A choir man leaned into the stock, mask of thin tin with a painted smile that had chipped at the corners. He had all night to aim. He would take a shoulder, then the weight would go to another, then someone would stumble, then the square would own them. A shadow took the choir man's throat. Not clean. People like to talk about clean kills. They are men who have never mopped. The assassin with the bound sword stepped out from the longhouse roof like a man deciding he'd wait on the next tile for the moon. He flicked something small and honest and sharp. The crossbowman dropped his crossbow to hold his blood in. It didn't help. The assassin looked down at Var. His expression said, "You still owe me your direction." Var didn't nod. He didn't need to. Debts know themselves. They broke into Sack Street where the granary doors showed welts from centuries of shoulders. The tower flowed behind, shedding arrows and instructions. The choir found other alleys, but here the city's lines favoured the watch. Long sight, few doors, corners that belonged to the men that carried the weight. "Stairs in 2 streets, Lyra gasped. Her voice sounded like someone who had learned to smoke in a place without tobacco just in case. "Stairs," Var said, "then the water, then the furnace." "The furnace is further," Uldren panted. "Further then," Var replied, "but fewer options for company." They reached crossings by mercy disguised as grime. The stairs went down between warehouses where men had learned to steal with a ledger. The river smelled rank and iron. Barges hunkered like dogs that don't trust whistles. On the landing, grey cloaks. Not 8, more. A dozen, then another rank, and the glimmer of lacquered poles. The tower's palanquin for moving things that should never be moved. Custodian Rel himself waited at the bottom of the stairs, hood drawn back, face calm the way old wood is calm. It has burned before and expects to be a chair again by morning. "Captain," he said, "we will take it from here." Var did not slow until he had to. The cradle's front rested against the top stair. Down below, wet steps shone like teeth. Rel looked up with the serenity of a man who's already paid and kept a receipt. "The way to Blackwater is not yours," Rel said. "Ours is the vault. We have letters. We have sigils. We have men who know the path without being tempted to taste it with their wrists. The way to Blackwater is open," Var said. "That's all that matters." "Open to what?" Rel asked. It was almost gentle. Kerrick's hands ached. He could feel each finger as a separate animal trying to run. He could smell the furnace when he closed his eyes, even though it was still a mile under and east. He knew how heat could hide in stone and wait like a snake in a child's sleeve. Rel's voice lowered, a man speaking to a man, not a tower to a watch. "You will not make it," he said. "Not all of you." "And then what? The choir takes it, or the water does, or the river sleeps with it like a drunk with a bottle. And next summer the fish will sing erosions your mothers will not recognise as hymns. And if we hand it to you, Var asked. We lock it, Rel said. We forget it while remembering it perfectly. We change the names of 3 streets and move a statue. We make a mistake, but not that one. You can't keep it, Lyra said. No one can keep it. You'll write a poem to it, and then one of your boys will decide he's talented. Then I will kill him, Rel said, so quiet no one could pretend he had been trying to be heard. And then I will kill the next. I am not a kind man, Watch Witch. I am a man who knows the shape of pity's grave, silence, river, breath. Dawn, Var said, without looking away from Rel. Will you let them take it? Dawn considered. He had the look of a man deciding whether to lend a friend a hammer. No, he said, because if it sings, I will hear it through stone. And then I will walk to your vault. And then I will be tired. Uldren, Var said. Uldren spat over the stair. The river rejected it. I'd rather drown with my boots on, he said. Lyra? Var asked. Lyra was looking at Rel as if seeing something that had once been better. I won't carry it into a box, she said. Not while it asks for a furnace. Then we go, Var said. Rel watched their faces like a man counting cards and finding they've all become leaves. He inclined his head, the smallest concession a man can make and still be himself in the morning. Very well, he said. We walk behind, and if you fall we will decide quickly. Decide this now, Var said. If I fall, Dawn takes the call. If he falls, Lyra. If she falls, Uldren. If he falls... He glanced at Carrick, and something like surprise moved his mouth. Carrick eats the stone. They didn't laugh. The relic hummed, interested. They started down the stairs. Stairs are treachery taught to stone. Men learn to fear going down because falling looks like prayer. The cradle found each step like a blind man touching the bones of a saint with his forehead. The weight shifted. Men swore in dialects that had been beaten out of them and come back for this one night with teeth. A shout above. The choir had decided stairs were their idea. They poured to the stairhead, masks bright against the wharf torch. The tower turned, drew, loosed. Choir fell like wheat in a hailstorm. Bodies tumbled, hit steps, hit men, were shoved aside by wooden skill. One found footing and a knife and came down the side rail like a gutter rat. Carrick saw him because he wanted to. Spear shaft met ribs. The man folded and slipped away. A coat dropped by a clerk whose bus had come. They reached the landing at the bottom. The river leaned against the stones like a drunk neighbour with opinions. Barges bobbed, their owners pretending to be asleep like men who hope thieves will decide to steal elsewhere tonight. A skiff waited. No one had hired it. It was simply the right size and tied up with a knot that would accept bribes. The assassin stood on its stern as if he had been there all his life. You'll need someone to make sure the oars choose the right side of the river, he said. I didn't hire you, Var said. You can't afford to, the assassin replied. Step carefully. Water has more rules than any guild. They set the cradle down onto the skiff with a sound that made the river think about rocks. The skiff rocked. The men crossed. Dawn last, because the river didn't like him, and he didn't like it. The tower fanned out above, eyes cool, strings slack for the moment. The choir gathered at the stairhead and sang with their feet. We push off, the assassin said. If you tip it, you will not swim. Noted, Var said. Carrick knelt on the bow, chain mitts to the forward pole, watching water for a face. The relic's hum went low and sweet. The river answered, humming back in current. For an instant he felt like a string tied between 2 instruments being tuned by enemies. Row, the assassin said, and Uldren and Dawn began to pull, short ugly strokes meant for ferries and funerals. The skiff slid out, the landing tickled their wake. Choir roars chased them and were bitten by water. Arrows hissed and dropped into the black. Shocked they weren't frogs now. The river took them. Larkenfall at night from the water looked like a city that had drowned and been talked into pretending otherwise. Bridges hunched like shoulders raised against a blow. Windows winked meanly. A cat on a mooring post watched them pass and flicked its tail, unimpressed by metaphysics. Furnace Inlet is under Market Arch, Lyra said. Gates iron. Gates old, Uldren said. Old iron makes bargains. Old iron hates being asked, Dawn replied. The assassin handled the ore with contemptuous competence. He'd probably killed 3 men on water and hated boats nonetheless. There, he said, pointing with his chin. Market Arch squatted at the bend. Bricks sweated with a century of copper, calcine chewing like chalk along the mortar lines. Beneath the arch, a black mouth bit the river and spat it under the city. The gate was there, a grid of bars 6 men thick, rivets like knuckles. Chains sagged. A padlock the size of a baby's skull hung low. The skiff nosed to the stone. Kerrick reached out and caught a loop. The stone made a sound through his glove, like a throat clearing in a church. Var, he said. Lyra, Var said. She slid forward, laid her palm flat on the lock and closed her eyes. 6 roads of memory went past her face like carriages. She spoke not a word but a texture. The lock held for 1 heartbeat. 2 decided it had been meant for an earlier problem, and opened like a widow choosing to sell a ring. Always hated that one, she said, not quite steady. They heaved. The gate moved. Water talked about it. The bars groaned. The assassin used the pole like a lever and swore quietly in a language that had only 1 curse but used it well. The mouth opened. The city breathed them in. Inside was night that did not believe in stars. The ceiling pressed. The oars sounded wrong. Thumps, not strokes. Water changed its mind every yard. Heat came in a long, patient draught from deeper in, from a place that had stopped needing wood and fed on other things. The relic's hum went higher. It sounded interested, the way a wolf is interested in a door that smells of herd. Blackwater, Uldren whispered. He had never seen it. He had dreamed it twice. They passed under beams men had set and forgotten because the beams had never forgiven them. Bones hung from some in strings like teeth necklaces for a city. The assassin ducked without looking. He had lived by learning the heights of other men's heads. Listen, Dawn said. The furnace's voice, not roar. Roars are for crowds. This was a long inhalation, stone taking breath through pores. The air around their faces grew slick. Sweat came and couldn't find skin that hadn't already been claimed by damp. Lyra wiped her hands and they were wet again before she'd finished the gesture. The tunnel widened, the water slowed as if reluctant to be seen attending a crime. The furnace space was a cathedral converted to industry. Pillars thick enough to carry shame, vaults blackened with 1,000 years of apologies. In the centre, a pit mouth where heat lapped not like flame but like an animal's tongue, too red to see except as relief. Chains drooped from overhead like stalactites that had chosen a different hungers. Land there, Var said, pointing to a shelf of stone with old rings set into it. They bumped the shelf. Men leaped. Lines caught rings. The skiff pretended to be obedient. Lift, Var said, and they put hands to cradle and grunted. The weight had found a home. It didn't want to move. Dawn's lips skinned back from his teeth like a dog being asked politely to share. Again, Var said through the sound of his own bones. It came up. Not all at once. Nothing comes up all at once but bubbles, but with the weight transferred from river to arms. They half carried, half dragged to the edge of the pit, where heat met them and said, "Are you sure?" Lyra's hair lifted on her head as if a hand had passed under it. "This is wrong," she said. "It wants to be here." "That makes it wrong." "Everything wants to be somewhere," Dawn panted. "Rivers want to be the sea. Stones want to be fields. Men want to be—" He ran out of breath and philosophy together. "On 3, Var said." He set his hand to the cradle. His eyes met Kerrick's. "If it calls you, tell it your name." Kerrick nodded once. Names did not negotiate. Names separated. 1, Var said. The relic hummed so sweet the teeth in Kerrick's head danced. 2. Heat kissed his cut and asked to come in. 3. They shoved. The cradle tipped. The relic slid, slow as a confession. It touched the lip. The rings on its hide chimed like bells in a village that had seen horsemen on the hill. It went over. It did not fall. It hung there, halfway, chain bands snagged on a tooth of stone, weight set into the notch like a body realizing it didn't want to be the first in. The hum climbed. Dawn heaved. The chain bands shrieked. Var put his shoulder to the cradle and felt his old scar rip a new line. Carrick looked down into the pit. The heat looked like a colour none of them would ever be able to describe without lying. For an instant he thought he saw shapes in it, women dancing and fields burning, and the curve of a city's wall written inside the flames like a plan agreed upon by men who would later deny they'd met. "Cut it!" Aldrin howled. "Cut the bands!" Lyra drew the knife she kept for bread and throats and set it to an iron strap. The knife stopped being a knife and became an opinion. It did not want to cut iron tonight. She cursed the blade by 3 saints who had been smiths first, and the saint of thieves because sometimes you needed him, and put the knife to work again. Iron peeled like bark. The hum spiked. The pit breathed yes. The last strap parted. The relic slid an inch. Then a hand the size of city grief closed on it from the pit and held. No hand, not hand. Heat remembers shapes men have loved and feared. This remembered all of them at once. The relic hung there like a child testing how long it can keep one foot on the stair in the dark. Carrick moved without choosing to. He set both mitts on the banded side, put his back into the push, and felt the stone speak through the chains. Mine, mine, mine. A voice like a grandmother and a knife and a bell and a bed. He leaned with the strength of bad years. His cut tore open through the scab. Blood ran down his palm inside the mitt. The relic felt it. The hum collapsed into a single note precisely his size. It told him, "You are a room. I will live there." It offered him memory, not his. A doorway. A woman's laughter in a dark place. A man's hand hitting stone because it didn't know what else to hit. Nights. Cold. Warm breath of a street. A boy sleeping because the alternative had no blankets. It packaged them and handed them to him as if to say, "See? We are the same. Why not come home?" Carrick said, "No," and didn't raise his voice. He pushed, not with arms, with name. Carrick. Nobody's son. Watchman. Hunger's enemy. The man who leaves doors closed if the house wants to sleep. The one who lifts when lifting is all there is. The relic slid. It went over. It fell like something considering its options and choosing the right one, which is always down. The heat made no sound men could own. The chain bands flashed and were gone, eaten like old sins. For an instant the hum became a tone too wide for a room. Then it was swallowed. Silence. Real silence. The kind that admits there had been noise. They stood around the pit, swaying, stunned by the absence. Behind them the assassin exhaled as if he had been holding his breath since noon. He knelt and cut the knots on his sword and let the cloth fall away. He did not draw it. He only touched the hilt and looked surprised to find it still warm. Rel stepped from the darkness where he had been all along, like a man deciding this sermon had not displeased him. He looked at Var with a face he had forgotten how to make. Human, unruled by law or purpose for a heartbeat. "It's done," he said. "Until it isn't," Lyra said. Rel's mouth twitched. "Yes," he said, "until it isn't." Water dripped. Somewhere in the dark a chain whispered to itself in rust. Var leaned both hands on the cradle and let his head hang. When he lifted it, his eyes were rimmed with the red of men that refused to cry because they might enjoy it. "We go," he said. They gathered what was theirs, blades, breath, the kind of jokes that aren't funny yet, and turned toward the skiff. Carrick lingered at the pit's edge. Heat stroked his face like a tired dog. In the red that was not light, he thought he saw, for a moment, a woman's profile in flame. Not Seraphine, not any woman he'd known, a shape the mind insists on adding to fire because it can't help it. The absence of hum felt like a cart horse standing still after weeks of creaking. He would miss it. He hated that. "Come," Var said. Carrick came. They slid the skiff back into black. The river took them with the reluctant courtesy of a host who disapproves of company, but has put bread out anyway. When they came back out under Market Arch, the wind had found the river and decided to explain it to itself. The greycoats on the landing were fewer. The choir on the stairs had thinned by a third and grown twice as hysterical. The assassin stepped off, light as a rumour. Rel looked at Var. "You will have made enemies," he said. "New ones. Better ones." Var shrugged. "We have always been popular." Rel inclined his head. "Go home," he said. "Sleep with knives beside your beds." "We sleep at the yard," Var said. "The knives are part of the pillows." They carried the empty cradle back up the stairs. It was lighter now. It felt like a joke told by a man who had been funny once. Above, the city was listening. That's what cities do when something large has swallowed something larger. They stop to see if they feel different. Larkenfall rolled its shoulders. Streets cracked their knuckles. Men in beds dreamed of heat and woke to cold. At the top of the stairs, a boy stepped forward from the shadow of a cart. He had straw hair. He could have been the boy from the green, if the world liked to reuse faces. "Is it gone?" he asked. "For now," Var said. The boy nodded as if that had been the only answer that could ever be said. Then he spat into his hand and held it out. Var hesitated. Then he spat into his own, and they shook. "For now," the boy repeated, satisfied. They walked back toward the yard through streets that made way, not out of respect, but to avoid touching the absence of a sound. Choir musks watched them from alleys and didn't move. Tower adepts melted into corners and remembered to be rumours again. Kerrick's cut stopped bleeding. It itched. He was grateful for the itch. It meant the skin was his again. At the yard gate, Uldren halted and looked up. The iron ribs had never looked so much like a jaw. "We did it," he said, wonderingly. Var spat in the gutter. The spit steamed. "We did something," he said. "The city will decide what." They went inside, the gate shut. The yard took a breath and tried to sleep. Outside, under a bridge no one liked because it reminded them of a broken tooth, Seraphine stepped from the shadow she had been for a night. She raised her face to the river breath and smiled like a wound healing wrong. "Fire is so fashionable," she murmured, "but I have always liked doors." She leaned her head to the stone and listened. Under the furnace's breathing, under the city's settling, she heard it. The faintest answer from somewhere that wasn't here anymore but could be, given desire and a bad plan. "Mine," the ghost of a hum said. "Soon. Part 4. The yard slept badly and woke angry. Men sharpened razors as if the day was stubble that deserved it. Lyra lit the stove and scalded mugs with water that had learned the taste of iron from the kettle. Dawn repaired a strap by chewing it soft and stitching with twine thick enough to hang a mule. Kerrick oiled the chain mitts and opened and closed his left hand until the itch in the cut went from tempting to trivial. Var read the night's reports with the patience of a man sanding a coffin lid. Slow, even, certain. 3 shops burned for no reason except envy. A body fished from the river with a grin cut into it, and stones in the pockets like poor jewellery. The choir quiet in the green but busy near Candle Court, where the older gods lived like unemployed relatives. 2 grey cloaks found in a culvert. Faces calm, pockets emptied of everything except their orders. He set the pages back in their tray and rubbed his eyes. The morning wore a pale shawl. Across from the yard, a woman swept her doorstep like a priest blessing stone. The city had the look of a drunk who had sobered but not repented. Janik knocked once and stuck his head in. He had a neck like a poker and opinions to match. "Invitation," he said, as if swearing. "Whose?" Var asked, though he knew. "The hall," Janik said, with something like pity. "Councillors. Rel guildmasters. The baker who sells to the baker who sells to the palace." "Working lunch," Var said. "Feast," Janik said. "They're calling it a feast." "Of course they are," Var said. "Men speak better with grease on their tongues." He strapped on the breastplate that had made better men into worse, adjusted the throat guard that pinched, and tucked a narrow blade behind his belt where polite company couldn't see it, and impolite company would pretend not to. "Keep the yard closed," he told Janik. "If anyone knocks, ask the door what it thinks first." Janik grinned, a brittle bearing. "Aye." Lyra and Kerrick fell into step. Uldren was already by the gate, rolling a cigarette that had no tobacco, and therefore no purpose except habit. You don't have to come, Var told them. We always don't, Lyra said, and didn't explain. They went out into a city that assumed any group of three was guilty of something and therefore wouldn't be lonely. The hall rose from the square like a cake left too long in the oven and covered with icing to hide the cracks. Banners hung limp. The steps had been washed. Blood leaves are learning in stone even when the stain is gone and the slab under Var's boot remembered. Inside smelled of beeswax and decisions gone stale. Servants ghosted. The great doors to the chamber stood open as if the room were a mouth that couldn't close without biting its tongue. They were late enough to be noticed but not scolded. Men arranged by importance in gradients subtle, as Weather looked up and measured the watch across with their eyes and other instruments. The head of the merchants wore a chain thick enough to moor regrets. The chief of the assassins sat as if the chair were a client. The thieves' factor had a mouth like a purse. Custodian Rel stood near the high dais, hands folded, a slate at his feet with sigils chalked like frost. Above them, a window let in seamed light, as if the sky had been stitched. Captain Var, the Lord Registrar intoned. He wore the city's seal hanging from his neck and a face the colour of boiled parchment. We are grateful for your energies. We are also alarmed by your energies. Sit. Var Saturday. Lyra ghosted behind him, not a servant, something worse and better. Kerrick stayed standing because he hated the chairs and wanted everyone to know. A boy came around with a tray, wine, bread, meat. Var took bread because it was an old offence and he trusted it. Kerrick took nothing. Lyra hid a slice of meat in her sleeve for later like a child with a dog. We understand, said the registrar, that the object causing distress has been disposed of. It has been returned to a place that understands it, Var said. Locked away, the head merchant translated. Hotter than your locks, Var said. Language, the registrar murmured sweetly. Plain, Var corrected. There were chuckles carefully arranged to sound like thoughtfulness. Rel's voice slid into the gap. The act was necessary, he said. It will have consequences. Everything does, Var said. Not everything, the assassin murmured. Some actions are elegantly without issue, those are the preferred kinds. Tell that to the bodies, Kerrick said before he could keep it in. The assassin's eyes went to him. They were not offended. They were curious, the way a cat is curious about a string that moves as if it were a snake. The city requires quiet, the registrar said. Quiet for commerce. Quiet for marriages to be arranged and debts to be forgotten and the news to be misheard. You have... He tilted his head, as if struggling to be generous. Disturbed the water. We drowned a song that wanted to be a river, Var said. Would you prefer it on your table? The merchant stroked the chain at his chest. That depends on whether it could be traded, he said lightly. Men laughed. It was terrible. Rel ignored the laughter. The choir will not be quiet, he said. They have lost their hymn. They will improvise. Improvisation is dangerous. And what is your prescription, custodian? The assassin asked, silk over metal. Hymnals? Containment, Rel said. Observation, removal where needed before infection, and a ritual of repair. The thieves' factor sniffed. Marches? Bells? A parade? People love a parade. No, Rel said. Something more tedious. We will change the names of streets. We will move 3 statues. We will redraw 2 wards. We will forgive debts owed by families who have lost children to the choir. We will make the city feel like it has been rearranged slightly, and in doing so we will break the memorized path their chant knows. Lyra blinked. It was almost magic. It was magic that pretended it did not want to be paid. And us? Var said. Rel looked at him. You will do what you have always done, he said. Walk the dark. Lift where lifting is all there is. And this time, you will do it knowing something larger than you is unhappy you succeeded. That narrows it down to everything, Kerrick muttered. The registrar lifted a hand for silence he hadn't lost. There is also the matter of the murder, he said. The word came down like a jug knocked over in a quiet kitchen. It stained. Var set his bread down. Which one? He asked, and found he meant it. The smith in Cobbler's Row, the registrar said, hammered to a new shape in his own yard. No witnesses, no tools missing, except one that his apprentice claims never existed. A dry little smile ghosted. An elegant absence. The apprentice insists his master had invented a... He consulted a note as if it might bite him. Hex pistol. Rel's head turned. The assassin's eyes narrowed. The thieves' factor made a note without moving anything anyone could see. Hex. Pistol, Var repeated. The words sat ill like a foreigner trying out a prayer. What does it hex? Distance, the registrar said. Pleased to know something. It sends killing across it. A bow? Lyra said. A bow kisses, the assassin murmured. This would speak. Who told the apprentice such a word? Var asked. The apprentice, the registrar said. Young, imaginative. You know how apprentices are with words they think will make them older. Names are heavy, Rel said. Even imaginary ones make the table tilt. Var stood. He disliked meetings because they gave men the idea that being in a room together meant the city agreed with them. We'll go to Cobbler's Row, he said. We'll ask the apprentice. We'll ask the Hammers. You will report, the registrar said. If this device exists, and I am not saying it does, you will bring it here. It belongs to the city. Nothing that kills belongs to the city, Var said. It rents a room until dawn. Captain, Rel said softly. Var met his eye and let the edge go out of his voice. We'll bring you news, he said. If there's more than news, we'll bring a cart. The meeting moved on to other items, grain, ships, whether the patrol could be shaved thinner over the ward of Orchard and still look like law when the wind hit it. Var let it wash over him. Lyra watched the councillors' mouths and read the lies from the way they kissed the words. Kerrick stared at the assassin's knuckles and thought about the bound sword and what kind of man binds a thing that makes him strong. They left with the taste of beeswax and hierarchy in their mouths. Outside, the square had found a broom and was sweeping up old resolve. Hex pistol, Aldrin said, testing the word. Sounds like a disease. It is, Lyra said. Cobbler's Row didn't make shoes anymore. It had been renamed 3 times by men who believed names made futures and discovered names only made maps. These days it made hinges and lies. The smithy squatted between 2 houses that wanted to argue about rent. Smoke eased from its throat the way breath eases from a thinking man. The yard gate was ajar. Someone had set it back against the wall and forgotten ever to shut anything again. Inside, the forge was cold. A scummed bowl of quench water sulked. Hammers waited on a rack with their heads lowered like dogs. The smith lay where men had left him. Chalk marks measured around him in tower script. Careful lines, ritualized compassion. His skull had the wrong shape in the wrong places. Teeth shone like the quietest bones. A single fly, bold as a thief, walked his cheek as if the city had posted a guide. An apprentice stood near the door trying to be furniture. He had wrists like willow switches and a rash of burns that were either the beginnings of a profession or bullets on a breast. His eyes were too wide and too dry. You the apprentice? Var asked. Yes, a captain, sir, he said all in a rush and hiccuped at the sir. What was his name? Lyra asked, because nobody else had. Master Fev, the boy said. Master Fev. He said I was to call him that because he didn't like master. How long? Var asked. Since last bell, the boy said. I went to fetch nails from the cooper. He didn't like the cooper's nails on account of the soft. When I came back, the door was shut and the smoke wrong, and I went in, and he was like that, only more. Who else knew you'd be gone? Kerrick asked. Only him, the boy said, and hiccuped again. I mean, Master Fev. Lyra crouched by the body, her face set in the careful mask of women who have done this before and survived their own humanity. She didn't touch him. She touched the ashes fallen from the forge, rubbed forefinger and thumb together. Someone stirred the bed, she murmured. Looking for something, Var said. Or proving something, Lyra said. She moved to the workbench. Tools hung above it on pegs, each a specific absence when gone. In the dust where light picked it out, a single long, clean line, as if a rod had lain there for months where everything else had gathered soot and then not. What did he make? Var asked the boy. Locks, the boy said. Iron flowers when the old folk died. Hinges that didn't creak unless you owed something. He said metal is a story and most men don't know letters. Did he talk about... New stories, Carrick asked. The boy blinked. Sir? Did he build something that shouldn't be? Lyra translated. The boy's mouth opened and closed. He said, he whispered. He said there was a way to tell iron to speak thunder without a bow. He said words wrong. He called it a gon. Then he said no, that sounds like a child, and he called it a hex. Then he said both were stupid, and he laughed and said maybe I should name it because I was younger and my soul hadn't learned to lie. Did he show you it? Var said. No, the boy said. He said it wasn't a toy to be shown until it was sorry for itself. Did he have pieces? Carrick asked. Yes, the boy said. And now the tears arrived, delayed by the city's schedule. A long pipe with grooves like a snail's handwriting. A lock that bit back when you pinched it. A little cup he called a chamber, and then said chamber was a stupid name because that was for rooms, not for anything that wanted fire. Where are they? Var asked. The boy looked at the bench, at the clean line, at the stove where someone had stirred the bed. Gone, he said. Var looked up to the lintel. Over it, on a nail, a small wooden token hung, a rough circle, a bit of rope, the kind men put on their doors when they believed certain people must not enter because of promises made in older smoke. He reached up. The token was warm. What guilds? He asked. None, the boy said. He said guilds are for men who need brothers to be forgiven, and he had none. Carrick prowled the edges of the yard. The neighbours' windows had discovered shutters. The alley held a smell of old beer and new fear. He crouched by the far wall and ran a hand along the bottom where the lime flaked. His fingers found a slice of cloth wedged, torn on a nail. It was grey, not tower grey, lighter, the kind of grey that always has one more pocket than you remembered. He stood and held it up. Thieves, Lyra said. The factor appeared as if conjured by his own mention. He had not entered. Men like him have a key to every threshold and the sense not to use them in front of policemen. But now he lounged in the doorway as if gravity did him favours. We don't like being named, he purred. You prefer to be counted, Var said. One missing, one killed, one paid. The factor's eyes flicked to the cloth. We didn't take your smith, he said. I didn't say you did, Var said. I said some of your cloth got thirsty for a nail. The factor smiled with no tongue. Perhaps one of our boys came to collect what we are owed, he said. Fev paid sometimes. With iron, it always thinks it is worth more than it is. Who else wants a tool that speaks thunder? Var asked. The factor's eyes flicked to Lyra and away again, to Rel, who was not there and yet always present when the city watched itself. Men who don't like to walk down alleys, he said. Men who prefer distance. Priests who have discovered their gods hear better when everyone else is quiet. Guilds that wish to be stronger in negotiations. Lovers, enemies, boys, the city, me. Truth, Lyra said dryly. It looks good on you. Briefly, the factor said, and the smile stayed. Your boys, Var said. Names? The factor sighed the way a man sighs over a ledger that has eaten his day. There were 3 working the row, he said. Nibs. Calf rule. Nibs is in lockup because he tried to pick a tower clasp and liked how it bit. Calf is in the river because he didn't listen to the boat. Roll hasn't been seen since moonrise. He is good at it. Find him, Var said. If you find him before I do, he won't be as good at it afterward. And if you find him first, the factor said mildly. He'll still be worse, Var said. The factor bowed with a tilt of the head that said he had been insulted and respected at once and had enjoyed both. We will look, he said, and drifted away, leaving the smell of good soap and older sin. Var crouched again by the body. The flies had told their friends. He had a wife, he asked. The boy shook his head. He had a bed that didn't creak and an oven that did and a book with drawings he didn't show me because he said I would laugh and he didn't want to kill me. We'll take the book, Var said. It isn't here, the boy said. Of course it isn't, Var said. Lyra's fingers traced the clean line on the bench. Grooves, she murmured. He cut grooves in the pipe? Yes, the boy said. He had a rod with teeth that ate the inside in spirals. He said the grooves would teach the thunder to pray straight. Rel would like that, Var thought with annoyance. Words that explained engineering as doctrine always made the tower stand taller. Carrick moved to the back door. It had been locked with a bolt a man would need 4 hands to lift, and yet it was open. He bent. The floor's dust had been scuffed in a pattern he knew. 2 men, one heavy, one not, carrying dead weight between them, or something that wanted to be dead. "We have to move," he said. "They're not going to sit home and shine it. They're going to try it." "Where?" Lyra asked. He closed his eyes. He asked the city without believing it would answer. The city does not answer men like prayers. It answers them like arithmetic. Where do you go when you've stolen a thing the world will never have seen? Somewhere that will keep your hands steady. Somewhere you can hear how straight the prayer goes. "The green," he said, "or a roof. Or the old dance hall near the rope works. It has long floors and no neighbours who complain anymore." "Split," Var said. "Aldrin, green with dawn. Lyra, rope works with Janik and 2 spears. Kerrick, roofs with me, and send word to Rel that if he has adepts near the clock, keep them low." "What do I do?" the boy blurted. "Live," Var said, and that was an order. They left him with his master and walked back into the alley that had learned a new secret and would sell it by nightfall. Kerrick had learned roofs from hunger. He climbed the way a rat negotiates theology, practical, without promises. Var followed with the quiet of an argument kept for later. They moved along ridge lines, crouched behind chimneys that had listened to every plan men had made and let the smoke carry most away. The city lay under them like a map that resented its key. "Where?" Var asked. Kerrick sniffed. Wind was a liar, but sometimes it told a truth it thought trivial. Coal smoke, fry grease, piss, hot copper, and something like lightning trapped in a bottle and opened slowly. "There," he said, and pointed with his chin. The roof beyond the rope walk, the old dance hall Lyra had named, wore a coat of tar that had given up trying to shine. Its windows were blind. Its skylight had been propped with 2 boards that said, "We broke in carefully." They crossed a gap with a step that didn't exist for men with less stubbornness. The tar took their boots and tried to keep them. Var's breath was neat. Not because he wasn't winded, but because he refused to be in public. Voices, low, excited, men trying to teach each other how not to be boys. Through the skylight, a long floor where once men had learned to be awkward with grace. Now crates. A lantern hooded to a slit. 3 men, one tall and nervous with a mouth that wouldn't stop, one compact and careful with eyes on the door, one in grey with an extra pocket, holding an object like a length of pipe with a wooden tongue and a clamp of iron that had been fussed over. He stroked it. Men stroke instruments, and women, and rope, and the wheels of carts. Anything that teaches the hand a shape that will later become a lie. Kerrick laid flat and let his breath go thin. The iron on the thing caught the lantern's smear and answered with a gleam that was not polite. The grooves, he thought. The grooves will make it remember which way to turn. The tall man licked his lips. "So it just speaks?" he whispered. "It speaks when I tell it," the grey man said. His mouth was closed too often for trust. The compact man watched the door. "We need something far," the tall man said. "We need to prove it to him." The hymn did not require a name. There is always a hymn in rooms like this. The grey man lifted the thing to his shoulder. It fit. That annoyed Kerrick. "What did Fev call it?" the tall man asked, trying to be in the story. "Mine," the grey man said. He cocked the clamp. The sound was a short note that learned you without asking. Kerrick put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled. 3 sharp notes. Var rolled, dropped to a ledge, hit the door with his heel. It opened inward with the eagerness of wood that had always wanted to betray you. He went through with the speed that made sense out of age. Kerrick dropped through the skylight. Time learned something. The grey man swung the pipe. It was slow. The compact one, Rule, moved to intercept with a knife, already in love with the idea of new blood. Var hit him with an argument rendered in oak. Kerrick struck the grey man's wrists. The pipe did not fall. The grey man had planned for wrists. He kicked Kerrick in the knee, in a way that said he had practiced on men who could not later testify. Pain was a bell. Kerrick bit his tongue and it rang. "Down," Var snapped without looking. Kerrick went low by instinct and not respect. The pipe spoke. It was not thunder. Thunder lies on the skin. This went through it. The word is crack, but that is a child's version. The real word is a perpendicular sound, a line through every inhale in the room. The lantern went out as if ashamed. The far wall took a new hole and attempted to explain itself to the street. Kerrick found the grey man's throat with his forearm and drove him backward into the crate. Wood complained. The pipe swung and groped. Kerrick's palm found the clamp and shoved it down. It bit him like a ferret. He welcomed it. Beasts that bite don't have time to whisper. Var and Rule were on the floor, one trying to invent leverage, the other trying to subtract it. The tall man ran to the window and found that air had opinions. He turned, produced a dirk he had no right to, and found Lyra in the doorway, breath athread, knife in reverse grip as if she denied everything including gravity. "You move, and the room decides your furniture," she told him. He froze. Furniture lived longer in Larkenfall. The grey man stopped fighting suddenly and smiled very small, the way a habit does when it sees home. "You can't keep it," he told Kerrick conversationally, jaw grating against bone. "Say that to every grave," Kerrick said. "See which answers." "It wants to be where men are," the grey man said. "It is a man's tool. It hates distance. It is the end of distance." He twisted. Pain flowered in Kerrick's wrist. The clamp snapped up. The grey man's left thumb found the little cup, touched, caressed. For love or count, Kerrick never knew, and the pipe's mouth tilted toward Var. Kerrick didn't think. He shoved his hand under the pipe's throat and took the clamp's bite for himself. The pipe spoke again. The word it used was his name, except no one else heard it like that. Splinters leapt from the crate and bit his cheek. The room's air had been carved. Var's oak settled the grey man's argument. He slumped and the pipe fell. It was heavier than it looked. Kerrick tried to catch it and nearly lost 3 fingers for trying. He let it go. It clanged on the floor like a bell at the wrong church. Silence. Then Lyra's knife tapped back to its sheath in a sound that meant breath again. "Rule!" Var panted, looking down at the compact man. "You were hard to find." Rule spat blood and a tooth and something like respect. "You were harder," he said. "Don't flatter me," Var said. "It makes me clumsy." Lyra bound wrists with cord that didn't care to be cut. The tall man started to sob in a way that belonged to the schoolyard, not to crime. Kerrick leaned against a crate and examined his hand. The clamp had cut in 2 crescents around the thumb web. It bled, honestly. The pipe lay on the floor, breathing nothing, looking as innocent as a bridge. "Don't touch it," Lyra said sharply when Var's boot nudged it. "I wasn't going to," Var said. "Yes, you were," Lyra said. "I'm not a boy," Var said. "You were," Lyra said. They stood over it like men over a foundling that bites. It was beauty for someone, Kerrick thought bleakly. Wood oiled with care, iron blued, the grooves invisible but present like memory. Fev had made it like a prayer that ends in apology. "Wrap it," Var said. "Not in cloth. Cloth remembers, in leather. Wet. And we carry it at arm's length as if it's a wasp nest with a title." "Where?" Lyra asked. "Not the hall," Kerrick said. He surprised himself. "Not yet." "Rel will want it," Var said. "Of course he will," Lyra said. "He's a man. Men want new rules dressed as tools." "The yard," Kerrick said. Var looked at him. "You want it in our house?" "I want it where our dead live," Kerrick said, "so it can smell a consequence." Var's mouth made a shape that would have been a smile if he'd had another life. "Wrap it," he repeated, and Lyra pulled a strip from an old cuirass hanging like decoration on the wall. She soaked it in the quench bowl, wrung it, wound the pipe like a snake being taught manners. The leather steamed and tightened and hissed whenever it touched iron, as if it knew. They marched Rule and the tall man out. The grey man they carried, because the room had taken most of him, and it was polite to return what you borrowed. The dance hall watched them leave with the eye of a place that had experienced worse music. On the roof again, the wind had found its teeth. Var handed the wrapped pipe to Kerrick. "If it speaks," he said, "drop it." Kerrick nodded. He could feel it through leather like a cat under a blanket. "Seraphine will hear about this before we have finished crossing the square," Lyra said. She already has, Var said, and didn't bother explaining how the city liked her voice. They made the yard without being chased and were therefore uneasy. Janek opened the gate, topping a grin with spit when he saw the bundle. What in the seven sinks is... A problem, Var said. Get me Harm the Armourer, and fetch 2 of the backroom cells with the bars that remember the riot. Cells don't move, Janek said, confused. Doors, Var said. We're going to move the doors to the cells. Janek galloped. Harm emerged from his cave of spare mail and bad words, wiping his hands on a cloth that made them dirtier. He peered at the wrapped pipe as if it owed him money. Ah, he said, without joy. A foolishness. Can we make it more foolish? Var said. Hum scratched his beard so sawdust fell from it. A box, he said, iron-bound, filled with sand, and a friend to sit on it. Do it, Var said. They laid the pipe in a chest, poured sand on it until the leather showed only as a hump. Halm hammered the lid shut and nailed iron straps over it, and drove their points over with such relish the nails complained. Friend, Halm said, and plopped his own considerable bulk onto the box. I'll sing to it, he added. Songs about horses and gates. It will hate it. Don't fall asleep, Var said. I don't know how, Halm said. Rull and the tall man were in cells that had once held men who thought fire was a pet. The grey man, whose name was likely not worth learning, lay on a cot with a tower leech hovering over him, with jars that looked like they had opinions about blood types. Send to Rel, Var said finally. We can't keep this in our lap. He'll sniff it anyway. Janek nodded and left. The yard settled around its new tenant like a house around a drum. Men spoke lower, doors shut more carefully. Someone laughed, then apologised to the wall. Kerrick washed his hands at the pump until they looked like hands he could use to touch bread again. The cut had oozed enough to glue his fingers and release them again with a small sound. Lyra brought him linen and a glance. You jumped under the mouth, she said. I didn't think, he said. Don't, she said, and bandaged his hand like a sailor tying a parcel to go to sea. Night found them again with its long coat. Var sent men to the green, to the rope works, to the ward of orchard, to the bridges with lanterns that threw light like mean coins. He sat in his room with a cup of water that tasted like other men's lips, and a ledger that said, You will die, but before you do, make a list. The gate knocked once, then again, then a third time with the particular rhythm of courtesy that is less polite than a shouted threat. Janek's voice rose, fell, found its rehearsed lines. Rel entered, hood back, palms empty. Behind him 2 adepts with grey minds. With them the assassin, because apparently he had decided to be a habit, and Seraphine, because of course. She stood in the doorway like a rumour that had decided to pay rent. I heard you'd found a thing, she said softly, eyes going straight to the iron-bound chest under Harm. We found a problem, Var said. Those are the most interesting things, she said, and stepped in uninvited. Everyone in the room made small adjustments as if the floor had decided to be a lake. Rel kept his gaze on Var. May I? He asked, nodding to the chest. You may look at the box, Var said. You may not lift it. If you lift it, Ham will sit harder, and you will be shorter. Rel moved close. He closed his eyes. He didn't touch it. His lids trembled the way a man's hand trembles when it's holding a letter from the dead and choosing whether to open. It is new, he said. I hate it. Good, Lyra said. It is not sorcery, he went on, but it will breed it. It is a hole in an old argument. An argument about distance, the assassin murmured. He stood by the wall where light made a smear and didn't find him. How far a man must come to you to kill you? What you can say to him as he closes, whether he can smell your breath. This steals the lines. Master Fev made it, Var said. Of course he did, Seraphine said. He was always going to. If not him, another. Men always build the tools their enemies have already imagined. She smiled at Kerrick's bandaged hand, polite as a winter funeral. And how does it speak, watchman? Did it sing your name? He did not rise. If I find out it learned it from you, I'll throw it into the river with your bones tied to it so the fish learn the chorus, he said, as if sharing a recipe. Her eyes flashed, proud. "That's better," she said. "You are less interesting when you try to be dull." Rel straightened. "We must put it in the vault," he said. "We must forget it. We must teach the city to misremember it." "And if it comes back?" Var said. "Then we will kill the man carrying it," Rel said, so simply that for a moment the room admired him. Seraphine's mouth curved. "You cannot uninvent a prayer," she said. "You can only invent louder ones." The assassin studied her profile the way a mason studies a crack. "Why are you here?" he asked finally. "Because you could be, or because you must be?" "Because I sew," she said, "and someone has cut a seam." Rel looked at Var, not at her. "The watch cannot keep this," he said. "It will infect your house." "It already has," Var said. "We're arguing like scholars." Rel's mouth tilted. "I can send 6 men," he said. "We'll carry it to the vault." "They'll be dead at the corner," Lyra said. "Or you will. And some boy will pick it up and marry it." The assassin nodded. "She's right. The choir will sing to roads. The thieves will set blankets on eaves. The merchants will price passage. And somewhere a child will point and say, 'That's the man who carries the new rule.'" "Then we wait," Rel said, "until morning. We move at dawn and confuse everyone. The city is stupid before its coffee." Var rubbed his eyes and let his head dip as if to a prayer he didn't like but had learned to love the cadence. "Dawn," he said, "if the city lets us keep a dawn." Seraphine turned toward the door, then paused by Carrick. "Your hand," she said. "Does it itch where it will scar?" "Yes," he said. "Good," she whispered. "That way when you touch a thing it will remember this night." She left like a draft that had read a book of etiquette and used none of it. The assassin lingered. "Bind the box with chains through the floor," he advised, casual. "Men steal chests. It's a religion." Rel placed 2 sigils on the lid with chalk that had come from a school once. They looked like children's drawings of windows. "If anyone opens it tonight," he said, "their eyes will be full of salt for a week." "That sounds like a blessing," Harm said. Rel actually smiled. "To a leech," he said. "To everyone else it is tears." They left the chest under Harm, under spells, under the low roof of the yard that knew the weight of seasons. Var sent men to the walls and to the rafters and to the gates. He sent Dawn to the cell corridor with a stool and a cudgel, and the authority to make up a new law until morning. He sat with Carrick and Lyra in the watchroom that smelled like damp wool and regret. "You should sleep," he told them, not because he believed sleep was coming, but because men like to hear impossible orders. Carrick dozed in a chair with his feet on the cold hearth and a blanket that had wrapped a dozen older, colder men. His dreams were full of a long corridor in which new doors had been nailed, between old ones so closely you could not tell which led out. He woke at the sound of wood breaking, not splintering, breaking, the sound of a tree cut with love. He was on his feet before the blanket decided it had been put to use. Var swore, low. Lyra's hand found her knife on a table whose grain had recorded a generation of similar reaches. Harm's voice rose from the back like a sailor finding water where water should not be. "What in the—" The gate boomed. Once. Twice. The third was like stone being made to admit a sin. Var reached the window slit and looked into night. The square outside was full. Not men with masks, men with faces. Choir, thieves, plain citizens in Sunday shirts and work boots, a woman with a baby at her breast and ash rings on her arms like bracelets. They stood and looked at the yard the way a congregation looks at a shut church when the bell has lied. At the front stood a man with a scarf over his mouth and 2 griefs in his eyes. He carried a signboard with a neat hand. It read, "Give us the tool." Behind him, a boy beat a drum, slow, patient. It had the sound of a heart that had decided to argue with its owner. "Seraphine," Lyra breathed. She wasn't there. She didn't have to be. Rel appeared at Var's shoulder as if he'd been under the table. "We should not have waited," he said. "Then we would be dead already," Var said. The assassin stepped out from behind a beam. "They won't storm," he said. "They will stand until morning, and then the city will say, 'See, nobody died. This is reasonable. Give them the thing.'" Var lifted the latch on the door. Lyra caught his wrist. "No speeches," she said. "I don't give speeches," he said, and went out anyway. The crowd breathed him in. A space opened because the night thought it decent. He stood on the top step and let the city count him. "This house," he said, "is where our dead sleep. It is not a church. It is not a bank. It is not a cupboard you can reach into for newer sins." The drummer kept the beat, respectful, undermining. The man with the scarf lifted his sign higher. "You don't want the tool," Var said, and the word felt wrong in his mouth. "You want the story that comes with it. That story is this. You don't have to be brave anymore. You can stand far away and win. You can be a coward and no one will know. This is a lie. The tool will know. It will tell you at night. It will tell your children when they ask why your hands shake." From the crowd, a voice. "You want to keep it for yourself." Var's jaw tightened. "I don't want it at all," he said. "We've had enough new rules. We need old ones that didn't fail." The scarfed man's eyes were wet. "My daughter," he said without moving his mouth. "The choir took her. You took their song. Give me something else to put in my hands." Var swallowed. He looked like a sword being asked to be a plough. "I can give you work," he said, finally hoarse. "In the morning. I can give you men who will go with you to get her bones or her body or her breath. I can't give you this. It will take your other daughter." "Right words," the assassin murmured behind him. "Wrong room." A stone flew, lazy as an old bird. It struck the wall. Men breathed out. It was the beginning. From the yard's side door came a sound like sand collapsing. Ham bellowed. Lyra ran before Var could. Carrick went with her because he had decided somewhere in the roof hall that he was tired of being last at the feast. They reached the back room as the iron straps bent in the middle as if a smith had hit them with a concept. The chest lid bulged. Harm sat red-faced, grinning with fury, sweat coursing down his neck, fists white on the lid's edges. "Sing louder," he gasped at himself, and sang a farmer's song about mending fences in spring and annoying the crows. The sigils on the lid smeared. Rel skidded in, dropped to his knees, and chalked faster than policy allows. His hands blurred. The chalk snapped. He ate the piece with his teeth and kept drawing with dust. The lid cracked. A line thin as a smile ran across it. "No," Lyra said, like a midwife to a widow. She laid her hand flat on the box and whispered a poet's meter. The wood hesitated. It remembered trees. It remembered wind. It remembered that some things bend. The crack paused. In the silence you could hear the crowd outside, the drum, the slow patience, the city making a decision like a man putting his coat back on. "Braces!" Rel snapped. Men hauled the cell doors into the room, old oak with iron veins. They threw them over the chest and slid the bars through rings in the floor. Ham laughed in relief, and then wept because it was easier. The crack did not widen. Outside, dawn found its edge. Var stood on the step and watched the sky decide. The scarfed man's arms sagged, not with surrender, with time. The drummer slowed. A woman sat on the curb and put her head on her knees and slept. The crowd thinned by 1, then 2, then 10. Men going to work because whatever else is true, rent doesn't squander itself. The assassin grunted. "Told you," he said. Seraphine's voice came from nowhere anyone could agree on. "This is not over." "It is never over," Rel said softly in the room of the chest. "That is why we are paid." Var stepped back inside and the door closed on the last of the drum. He looked at Carrick and Lyra, at Harm, at Rel chalked round with his own lines, at the iron box that had learned a new song and hated it. He looked at the yard and saw, for a glancing instant, the shape of a city that might survive if it learned to love boredom again. "Breakfast," he said. "What?" Carrick said, wiping his bloody palm on linen gone brown. "Breakfast," Var repeated. "We're about to make a day. We should eat it first." He walked toward the kitchen as if he had always intended the night to go this way. Lyra laughed, a raw sound. Ham slapped the box affectionately and muttered to it about porridge. Rel wiped chalk from his palms and looked at the door as if measuring it for memory. Outside, the city took another breath and counted its coins and found a few missing, and decided to work anyway. In a gutter 2 streets away, a piece of paper slid in a thin stream. Someone had written on it in a hand that pretended illiteracy, "At dusk. Market Arch. Bring the child. Bring the tool, or we bring the river." Seraphine's nail lifted the paper from the water. She read. She smiled, and it was not a wound this time. It was the shape of a plan finding its shoes. "Doors," she murmured again, and tucked the threat away like a love letter you intend to answer with a dagger. By late afternoon, the yard smelled of buckwheat porridge and iron filings. Halm refused to vacate his post, eating from a bowl balanced on the chest while glaring at anyone who approached as if they were poachers in his private forest. Rel drew a ward on the threshold, unassuming, almost ugly, then blurred it with his boot. "Pretty magic is dishonest," he said to no one. Var took a short sleep on the bench in his office, which had the comfort of a confession and the softness of a rumour. He woke mean and clear, the way knives wake when you open the drawer. Lyra was already at the long table, halfway through restringing a crossbow with a cord that might have once been part of a harp. Carrick flexed his bandaged hand and made a face at the itch like it was a joke that had outstayed. Janek brought a scrap of paper of the sort you could buy 3 for a penny if you liked to have your secrets fail you. Seraphine's neat knife-cut smile seemed to be on the page itself. Market Arch dusk. Bring the child, bring the tool, or we bring the river. "Which child?" Carrick asked, even knowing the answer. "Any will do," Lyra said, equally knowing. "The choir will trade one breath for another. They call that justice." "Their justice can drown," Var said. "We bring no child. And we bring no tool." Carrick tapped the knot in his bandage. "Then what do we bring?" "Men who know how to stand in a bad place and not blink," Var said. "And 2 who know how to disappear when blinking would be tactless. Bring Dawn, Uldren, Janek. Harm stays. Rel, .. "I have to keep the box in the world," Rel said. "If the world senses it alone, it will come court it like a mad lover." "Fine," Var said. "Seraphine will be there. She will bring her choir. The thieves will be a curtain. The merchants will have hired eyes on rooftops because they always admire violence until it breaks a window they like. The assassins will have a bet with themselves about which artery is best dressed. So, we go loud enough to be heard, soft enough to be missed." It had rained and stopped without making up its mind about dirt. The market arch crouched at the east end of the old bazaar like a stone eyebrow. Beneath it, the wind collected small things. Dried beetle wings, coins that tried to pretend themselves washers, the occasional weak prayer. Stalls shuttered early. No one wanted their melons in the newspapers. They arrived in what in another city might be a formation. Here, it was a suggestion. Dawn and Uldren flanked the archer's shadow. Janek took the right side alley and made it look like a place a stray dog could lean against without falling asleep. Carrick and Lyra walked with Var into the arch, as if they were tired of the argument and had come to see the end. Seraphine stepped out from a stone with no business producing a woman. She wore grey that had been friends with dusk since before it was named. Her hands were bare, and you could tell that was deliberate. 2 choir brothers lingered a pace behind her, one with a drum at his hip, one with a bell in his hand that had lost its clapper and therefore its purpose. "You didn't bring the child," she said, as if registering a minor rudeness. "We brought men," Var said. "Adults can choose their harms." She eyed the archer's upper shadow. "You also brought a thief in a good hat and a man pretending to be a wall." "Hello, Dawn." Dawn did not answer. Walls rarely do. "Where is she?" Lyra asked. She did not incline her head. She did not make her voice smaller. "The girl from Lime Court. The one with a scar under her eye like a comma. You wrote a threat. We came to make it change tenses." Seraphine's mouth shaped admiration and regret in equal measure. "You learned her face," she said. "That isn't policy." "It's hunger," Lyra said. Seraphine turned and signalled. The bell-less bell chimed without sound. The crowd parted like cloth, and there the girl was, hair hacked short with generosity instead of skill, wrists bound in ribbon that would come off if she wanted it badly enough. She stared at Var with the sacred loathing of a child who has discovered law too early. A man stood at her shoulder with a knife that had forgotten it was supposed to be elegant. He was nobody. The city employed many nobodies when order broke down. Var recognized him anyway. The scarf, the signboard from Dawn, the grief that had learned a second language. "You're the father," Var said. The man didn't look at him. His eyes were bricks mortared in place. "I told you to put something in my hands," he said to the air. "You put a knife instead," Var said. "They will take it from you when the scene is over and give you a hymn." Seraphine's voice threaded between them. "We're generous," she said. "We will trade. You bring us the new rule, we give you back the old life. It's tidy." "No," Var said. "New rules belong to undertakers." Seraphine's gaze slid toward the roofs. "There are undertakers here," she said. "Everyone brought their best. Even the tower, though they keep their hoods low when they are ashamed." Rel stood in shadow beyond the arch with 2 adepts and a priest, who looked as if he had discovered that faith and office were less similar than advertised. The assassin watched from the teeth of the arch itself, balanced on stone useless as wings. "Show me your hands," Seraphine said suddenly to Kerrick. He raised his bandaged right. She smiled without malice. "I wanted to be sure you still had them," she said. "Guns can be greedy." The words slithered in the air like a snake that had learned to read. The choir behind her moved as one to the consonant. Lyra stepped. It wasn't much. It left the ground untroubled. But the knife at the father's hand remembered it was in the world, and the hand remembered it was trembling, and the blade decided not to be daring. She was next to the girl without the intervening space having agreed. "Do you want to go?" Lyra asked, calm. "If you say no, I will stay. If you say yes, I will cut the ribbon and the man behind you will have fewer fingers than he woke with." The girl's eyes were wet. "They sang to me," she whispered, voice thudding in her throat like a trapped bird. "I thought I was stone until I wasn't." "Bodies are rude," Lyra said. "They believe songs even when they despise the singer." Seraphine watched, head tilted as if witnessing a craft fair. "This is a good evening," she said. "Let us not spoil it with lies. Captain, you can't keep the thing you found. You don't have the right history." "Neither do you," Var said. "You have louder priests." "Listen to her," the assassin said conversationally from nowhere in particular. "She's rarely wrong when she's right." Rel stepped forward. "I have 30 men at each end of the square," he said quietly. "If this goes crooked—" "This is a circle," Seraphine interrupted gently. "It cannot go crooked. It will end where it starts. Captain, choose." Var looked at the father, then at the girl. He looked at the stone, and at the arch, and at the dark that had made a cathedral of this corner. He sighed, the sound a man makes when he chooses the harder argument because it's the only one he can say out loud. "We'll make a different trade," he said. "You let her go. You take me." Kerrick's head snapped around. "No," he said. "Too late," Var said mildly. "I've said it." Words are bridges. Seraphine's eyes lit. Delight, fury, something akin to grief. "Tempting," she murmured, "but predictable. Men of law throw themselves into machines in the hopes that gears remember gentleness. I need you out there, Captain. I need you to hold back the flood so I can count the bodies." "Then you don't get a trade," Var said. "You get a story. It has an ending. You hate those." "The child," the father began, voice breaking in the middle like a cheap hook. Lyra's knife went click like a tongue unlatching. The ribbon fell away. The man at the girl's shoulder made the kind of decision he would regret in every life he did or didn't have, and moved. Kerrick didn't. He arrived. His bandaged hand snapped the man's wrist back. The knife clattered. The girl bolted the wrong way on instinct and slammed into Lyra's arm, which insisted on kindness the way a bar insists on its crossbeam. "Go," Lyra said, and demon-eyed Dawn was suddenly there, an avalanche in a cloak, plucking child and tucking her behind a pillar with the ease of a man hiding a bottle. "What now?" Janek muttered in the alley. "Now we bleed," Aldrin said, lighting a cigarette he could not finish. Seraphine exhaled. The choir lifted their voices, not a chord, not a melody, a pressure. a note the bones hate. The air went syrup thick. Men blinked tears without sadness. The world leaned. Carrick tried to step and found the ground had opinions about his ankles. Lyra's knife felt like a memory in her hand. Var steadied himself with 2 fingers on the arch and whispered a word he'd learned from an old watchman who swore at gravity in his sleep. It wasn't magic. It was fatigue reframed. The air shrugged off him. Rel's adept spoke back to the sound with counter-syllables that tasted of copper. The choir's note cracked, healed, slithered higher. A stone in the arch shivered and coughed out dust. The father fell to his knees, sobbing, the blade forgotten, his name forgotten, everything forgotten except the hole where the song had found a room. "Stop!" Var said, and didn't raise his voice. "You will bring the arch down, and then we will all be devout." Seraphine lifted her hand. The choir's note died like a knife put away clean. The silence afterward had thorns. "Bring me the box," she said, "or I will sing until the city goes blind." "You won't," Var said, "because you want to live in the city you're breaking, and because you're more cowardly than your priests." The corner of her mouth twitched. "We'll get along, you and I," she said, "if we both survive this century." "You won't," the assassin observed helpfully. The girl sobbed behind Dawn's coat. The father got to his feet and found his signboard nowhere, and looked suddenly like a man who had carried something heavy for years and discovered it was his own heart. "Go home," Var told him. "Eat bread. Sleep. Tomorrow you can start again being a man in a city that isn't kind." The father blinked like someone waking on a key. He stumbled away as if the stones were giving him excuses. Seraphine watched him go with mild interest, then turned back to Var. "No," she said, "to nothing, and then again, to everything. No, we do this later. We do it with witnesses and rhetoric and sad bread. Enjoy your victory, Captain. Put it somewhere the rain can't find." She stepped backward into the shadow the arch kept for old lovers, and was less. The choir trickled away. No riot, no triumph, just that slow dissolving that makes tyranny look polite. The thieves were suddenly not there. The assassins had been nowhere at all. Janek whistled a note that meant alive. Dawn unfolded to reveal the girl who glared at Lyra, then at Var with a child's courage, sharpest when the danger had already passed. "Why didn't you let me cut him?" she demanded, small chest heaving. "I hate him." "Because hating is work," Lyra said, "and you have other chores." The girl looked at Carrick's hand. "Does it hurt?" "Yes," Carrick said. "Good," she said, and then looked embarrassed. Var rubbed the grit from his eyelids. He felt older than his boots, which was criminal. "Get her to the yard," he said, "then to Lime Court. If her aunt has a door, we stand outside it and pretend to be statues until midnight." "And in the morning?" Carrick asked. "In the morning we carry a box," Var said, "and we pray to a god we don't believe in that Seraphine fancies noon." Dawn got stuck somewhere behind a bank of weather and arrived late and sullen. The yard ate eggs as if they had optimistic chickens attached. Hum had not moved. He'd grown roots and opinions. Rel looked like a chalk figure left out in rain. Someone had put a blanket over him and he had forgotten to resent it. The plan was modest. 3 carts, 1 decoy chest, 1 reel, all draped in old sailcloth that had known the swear words of men who died incorrectly at sea. 16 watchmen who could pass for carters if you squinted and didn't know carters. Lyra on the roofline, Carrick in the shadows, Dawn at the wheel of the real cart because some men bully horses into obedience and some men get cooperation by radiating enormous despair. "Vault," Var said to Rel. "You swear it." "I swear it," Rel said. 7 doors, each of which lies, and a floor that will not hold anyone who has lied fewer than 1,000 times. "Perfect," Var said. "We have men qualified." They rolled at a pace that wouldn't attract attention if the city had been asleep. It wasn't. The city smelled the move like a weasel smells a henhouse. Curtains shifted. Boys ran. Men leaned on brooms with the haunted air of those who have never owned one. The choir were present only as a rumour. Thieves were everywhere as fact. Carrick walked the left flank, hand on the cart's rim as if steadying it, eyes counting windows, mouths. Ghosts. Lyra flickered rooftop to rooftop. Twice she paused to cut a trip line and once to kick a stone off a parapet into a waiting hand that had thought itself clever. They took the long way because the city had learned their short ones. Over Bridge 2, not 4, because 4 had a gargoyle with eyes for Seraphine. Through Candle Court at a hop because the older gods were still hungover from last night's hymn fight and wouldn't spare a lightning bolt for a mundane caravan. They made the third turn without losing a wheel or a temper. At the fourth, the street ahead filled slowly with men who looked like they had been hired to look like a mob and had taken the job seriously. Faces wrapped in cloth, hands empty in a way that promised they wanted to be full. A woman at their front holding a book upside down which was either cunning or irrelevant. Var lifted his hand. The cart slowed to a conversational pace. "Morning," he said. "Stop," said the woman, finding the right page at last and nearly convincing the book to read itself. "No," Var said. She blinked. "We represent the common... You represent the uncommon desire to be someone else's excuse," Var said. "Tell your paymaster we'll send a receipt when we have time to lie." Someone behind the woman threw a stone. It winged past Var's ear, kissed the cart, and fell, ashamed. A man with a scar that drew his mouth into a comma stepped from a doorway with a crossbow he held like a guess. He fired. The bolt hit the decoy chest and split as if disappointed. "Nicely done," Lyra said from a roof, and then put an arrow through the crossbowman's sleeve, pinning him to the door. "Don't fidget," she added. "You'll pull it out and then bleed in front of children." The crowd surged in that peculiar way crowds do. Forward, back, sideways, each man convinced the others are braver, and therefore pushing them into the role. Dawn bellowed, a sound that had moved bulls and court clerks. The horses set their feet and decided to be mountains. Kerrick slid under the cart as a blade swiped above where his neck had been advertised. He popped up on the other side in a man's face and discovered there are eyes that do not expect consequence. He corrected that for him and pushed him toward a door that obliged by getting in the way. Var walked ahead of the cart because he found the world parted for men who pretended to be inevitable. He was almost right. 2 boys dashed in to cut at the wheel straps and found Janek's boot instead, which is what happens to boys who run toward wrong gods. The woman with the upside-down book found the right way up and recited, "By the people's will, you will go home and discover many of you left fires you forgot," Var finished. "Move." Courage entered the woman like a demon that had been on a long fast. "You can't keep it forever," she hissed. "Excellent," Var said. "I was afraid I'd have to." A whistle cut the air. The thieves can't for enough too much. The crowd slumped, the way bread does when it has been shouted at. Men parted, ashamed of their feet, and the carts rolled through. "Next time," Kerrick said to the air, "they'll bring a song we can't hear the end of." "Next time there won't be roads," Lyra called down, then disappeared behind a chimney. The vault's door looked like a wall. Rel said a word like a cough, and a seam appeared as reluctant as a secret from a living witness. 7 doors, each plainer than the last. Otherwise Rel would have been lying about that bit and the floor might have taken offence. Inside, the space was small because dignity does not require breadth. A single pedestal waited like a tongue waiting for a name. Helm, having refused to be left behind, looked around and grunted as if to say, "I have slept in worse rooms for better reasons." "Here," Rel said. They set the chest down. Helm lifted his bulk off it like a mountain, being polite. Lyra unwound the sand-packed leather. Kerrick flinched even though his bones had stopped hearing phantom shots. Var stood with hands at his sides because he had never liked altars. The wrapped thing lay on the pedestal for a moment like a serpent choosing whether to forgive you. Rel laid 2 fingers on it and winced as if someone had whispered to his teeth. He looked at Var. "I can keep it," he said. "I cannot unmake it." "That's our work," Var said. Rel blinked. "To unmake?" "To make enough slow days that the fast ones lose," Var said. "To make the city bored. Boredom is mercy. Boredom is the only proof we did it right." Rel's mouth shaped something like a prayer and then remembered who he was. "We'll try," he said. They left the vault. The doors swallowed themselves. The wall became a wall again. Outside, a boy sat on the steps with a loaf of bread he had stolen so openly no god could condemn him for style. He watched Var and said around a mouthful, "They're going to sing at noon anyway." "They can sing to the stones," Var said. "We've got ears elsewhere." The boy laughed and ran off to a life that wouldn't last or would last too long. Seraphine waited at the corner with the posture of a woman pretending to be idle. "Thank you," she said, and Var almost laughed because it was the last sentence he'd expected. "For what?" he said. "For making me work," she said, and then, "You've bought a week." "That's longer than most meals," Var said. She studied him. "You'll die of this," she said finally. "Not by my hand. Not by a hex. You'll die of 1,000 small rites performed correctly." "Good," Var said. "I'm not greedy." She smiled and went, and the street looked cleaner after her, which was a trick and perhaps a courtesy. Back at the yard, Ham finally slept with his head on the empty chest like a dog on a boot. Janik wrote 2 reports, one for the hall that lied less than usual, and one for the shelf that could stand the truth. Dawn fed the horses an apple each and told them a joke he'd told every horse since his father taught him to be afraid of quiet. Lyra took the girl from Limecourt home. The aunt had a door. It was stout. It had been shut in men's faces for worse reasons. Lyra leaned on the jamb as the woman cried without indignity, and the girl went inside with her own feet, not carried. Lyra stood there until the elves of dusk walked up the street and made the lanterns clear their throats. Kerrick climbed to the yard's roof and watched Seraphine's choir gather like rain that had learned to walk. He couldn't hear their words, but he could feel what they wanted. Distance erased. Old courage replaced with new cleverness. The city turned into a map where all roads led to the singer. Var joined him, joints registering complaint and being ignored. "How's the hand?" he asked. "Honest," Kerrick said. "Keep it that way," Var said. "I need someone who hates magic enough to tell me when I've started using it." Kerrick looked at him. "You threw yourself under the wheel tonight." "Practice," Var said. "One day, I might have to stop the cart." They stood together in the blue that cities wear before night decides to be formal. The choir began to sing. It was a beautiful sound, because beautiful is the most dangerous weapon. "It won't stop," Kerrick said. "No," Var said, "but it might tire." "And when it doesn't?" Kerrick asked. "Then we go on patrol," Var said, "and we drink bad coffee, and we add names to the list, and we hand little girls through doors." "And we die of it," Kerrick said, almost cheerful. "Yes," Var said, "but until then we're late for supper." The choir sang until the stars hid. They didn't shout. They didn't chant. They pressed a single note into the lungs of the city, a hum that made cobbles sweat and shutters rattle, as if remembering an earthquake that hadn't happened yet. Larkenfall endured. That's what cities do. But endurance isn't free. The watch endured with it. In the yard, men slept in turns, though not deeply. Dreams were littered with grey hands and the long snarl of distance closing. Kerrick woke 3 times with his fist raised, striking at shadows that left before they could be blamed. Dawn took 2 shifts on the wall, silent except for the crack of his knuckles. Lyra wrote small runes on paper scraps and burned them in the stove, muttering about smoke finding better things to cling to than lungs. At midnight the gate thudded. Not the heavy boom of siege. A polite knock repeated until Janik swore and lifted the bar. The assassin walked in, hood drawn against a drizzle that had found the city and decided to stay. He dripped onto the stones, each drop deliberate. "Should I call it courtesy?" Var asked him from the watchroom table, "or boredom?" "Neither," the assassin said. "Work." He set a wrapped bundle on the table. The cloth was stiff, soaked through. Var unrolled it and found a crossbow. Not a new one, not clever. Old wood, steel production stained string. Nothing remarkable, except for the bolt already set. The point was glass. Kerrick leaned close. "Alchemy?" "Not mine," the assassin said. "Not yours. Choir work. It would shatter in the body and sing from inside the wound. I removed it from a man who thought himself invisible." "Where?" Lyra asked. "Ropeworks roof," the assassin said. "Same dance hall you raided last night. Your prisoners spoke." Rel, who had not left the yard in 20 hours, frowned. "I did not authorize their tongues." "They weren't asked," the assassin replied, bland. "They told. Choir men know confession before crime. It is their talent." Var touched the bolt with a finger and felt the faintest vibration, like standing too close to a bell after the ringer has gone home. He rapped the bow again. "We burn it." "No," Rel said sharply, "we study it. Every new heresy is also a map." "And every map is a way back," Var said. "Burn it." For a moment they stood, men who had survived too long to enjoy compromise. At last Rel inclined his head. "Very well. But burn it under sigil, not with firewood. It must be remembered as ash." Ham carried it out into the yard, set it on a stone, and hammered the glass until it became dust. He swept the dust into a bucket, poured it into the forge, and lit the bellows. When the flames hissed green, he spat. "Sing to that, you bastards!" Dawn never truly came. The sky greyed reluctantly, as if embarrassed to be seen. The choir were gone from the square, but their song lingered, clinging to the eaves. At breakfast, Janik read out the night's reports. A boy drowned in a dry gutter. A horse that broke its own legs trying to run from silence. A tower adept who slit his palms and wrote runes in blood on his own wall before falling asleep with a smile. And, Janik added, a drummer. "Explain," Var said. He was seen at Market Arch again. Alone this time, drum on his hip. He struck 3 beats, then stopped. The men watching said it felt like being counted. "They'll strike 4 tomorrow," Lyra murmured. "Or none," Carrick said. "No," the assassin interrupted from the corner where he'd chosen to exist. "None would be worse." By noon, the watch was stretched thin. The hall demanded patrols visible in every ward. The merchants demanded guards for their counting houses. The thieves hinted at cooperation, which usually meant trouble. Carrick walked Candle Court alone, boots sinking in the wax that pooled between cobbles from centuries of offerings. The old god's statues glared down, faces hacked off, names rubbed smooth by smoke. He didn't pray, he listened. A whisper like thread pulled through cloth. Distance ends. Distance ends. He spun. No one. Only the gutter, thick with wax. He pressed his palm against his bandage. The itch was back. He didn't tell Var. That night the hall hosted a feast for the city's unity. Bread, wine, roasted fowl. Tables long enough to shame reason. The watch were invited as guests, which meant targets. Var, Lyra, Carrick and Dawn took their seats at the lowest table, among clerks and factors. Rel sat above, near the registrar. The assassin was present, though no one could agree whether he had been invited. Seraphine wasn't seen, but her shadow might as well have been carved into every pillar. Halfway through the feast, the registrar stood. He raised his cup, gave a speech about order and prosperity, the usual lies, and then he fell forward. Not gracefully, not theatrically. He fell like a sack of wet sand. The hall gasped. Wine spilled. Blood leaked from his mouth, thin and dark. On his back, stuck between the ribs, was a knife. Plain, iron, wrapped in ribbon. The choir's ribbon. "Doors," Seraphine's voice whispered, though she wasn't there. The hall erupted. Var dragged Carrick and Lyra back to their feet. Dawn shoved a clerk under the table to save him from being trampled. Guards clashed with guards. Tower adepts shouted orders that had no meaning. At the dais, Rel's face was calm. Too calm. His hands didn't reach for the knife. They traced a sigil in the spilled wine, whispering to the blood as if asking its permission. "Captain," Carrick said low, "this is war." "No," Var said, "this is worse. This is politics."